there. It is so great to see you guys again. Thank you for being here. And first and foremost, I have an amazing panel for you guys to listen in on and hopefully absorb some just great empowerment today. So I have three amazing women that I am just thrilled to introduce to you. And what we're going to be talking about today is how do we empower each other as women in the workforce from different backgrounds, different paths of life, and what else can we be doing to empower ourselves through our careers, through our home lives, as well as just in everyday aspects as we go through our journey. So get excited, and here are our panelists. Hi guys, how are you today?
Hi, doing well.
It's so great to see your faces. So I would love to you guys to one by one talk about your journey to kind of give some context as we go through our questions today. Shelby, would you mind starting us off, giving us a little context on who you are, why did you join this panel, and what has your journey been so far?
Oh gosh. Well, thank you for having me and reaching out. I know we were at Topgolf and you threw this idea my way and I said, that sounds like a really great idea. I want to talk further about it. So I'm really excited to be a part of this and thank you for doing that. So my name's Shelby Allman. I work in business development for an accounting firm. We specialize in operational accounting. So I like to joke and say we're the life of the party. But my journey to accounting, the accounting world has been, a long journey. So I'm happy to share that with you too. But really to answer your question about what was one of the reasons why I wanted to be a part of this was just mainly to hear other perspectives from my own, right? Because we're all, if we're honest with ourselves, we're all learning and growing. And I think when you can sit in a room full of women and hear their experiences and the challenges they face and how they overcome them, you learn more about yourself. So that's one of the reasons I came. I'm going to be honest. It was kind of a selfish reason. I wanted to hear some insights from others and then just enter in what my point of view and see how it compares to others. But yeah, I don't want to take up too much time. I didn't know if you wanted me to talk more about my journey and how I got here, if you wanted to save that for another moment, but happy to share that too.
Let's save that for right now, but I completely, being selfish on this is absolutely okay. So I completely understand. Alicia, why don't you go next?
All right. Well, I shared with you. Good afternoon. As Amber requested, I'm going to share a little bit about me and why I'm here today. Amber shared already, my name's Alicia Jewell, and I'm going to just kind of give you an overview of some of the roles I see that I take on in my life. I'm a manager with HHM CPAs. I'm a wife, a mother to 6 and a 9-year-old boys, a daughter, a sister, and a friend. And then there's probably other roles that I've left out, but these are the ones that I focus on as I prioritize my life. So I want to take you back to my early years, and I had the pleasure of growing up in a family that moved 7 times in my childhood. So if you average that out, that's moving once every 2 to 3 years. But it included some pretty cool locations like 4 different states in the US, Canada, Australia, and Singapore. So this gave me the opportunity to see firsthand some different cultures and belief systems. So that, to me, I came away with that very open-minded and with a belief system that doesn't filter people based on religion, gender, etc. So while I enjoyed the adventure and the exposure I received as a child, I guess it shouldn't surprise us that since graduating from college, I've lived within a 50-mile radius. So during that time since college, I grew into adult and into my careers as well, which included banking and public accounting. Interestingly enough, though, both of these are industries that have traditionally been male-dominated. So I mentioned previously my open-minded mindset that I grew into through my childhood. And I guess I've had that over time, but especially over the past year with some of the events in our country, I had come to realize that while I'm open-minded, it doesn't always mean that society, familiar, and other environments hold those same belief systems. So it's important for us to come together and have discussions like we're having today. So I say individuals because while our focus today is on women, I believe these concepts and thoughts and ideas are applicable to all those who may fall in a category that doesn't get full representation. And also I spoke of my boys as my husband and I raised those 2 boys. I want to make sure that to provide them with information so they can be part of the next generation that continues forward with closing some gaps and then also speaking up for improvements in our world. So just Bear with me a minute. I'm going to give you an example to round out who I am and why I'm here. So as an auditor, we use sampling to test and verify a population of transactions. So in selecting that sample, it's important that we make sure it's representative of the population, right? So for instance, in a 401k plan, if 40% of the employees are participating in the plan and we pull our sample, then our sample should also have 40% that are participating. So as I look at our topic today, empowering women is important because in my industry, while 60-some% of the population is women, only about 26% make up the partner sample. So if we're looking at and tie back to our 401k example, a sample of partners in public accounting is not representative of the population. And I know this is true for other industries. So today, I hope that I and we collectively can help to bring industries that fall into similar percentages and provide them with information to work towards having samples that are representative of their population. So thank you, Amber. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to share together thoughts about women in the workforce and opportunities for empowerment.
I love it. Isn't it so true that we look at our population, even in the United States, and then when you go into the workforce, you're like, wait a second, this feels a little off, right?
Yeah.
So it is truly, I loved the idea. First, you mentioned the roles. I can say, knowing these three women on the panel list, you guys all have had many, many hats. And that's one of our terminologies in using Workday is many hats, many roles. That's what you do. And you do it gracefully most of the time. Let's be honest, as much as we can.
Yeah, sure.
But I do think I truly, Alicia, I love the concept of let's go through this and look at this from a population perspective and being representative, because it isn't just about women. It's about minorities. It's about showing what we can with our, culture, and especially even my opportunity at Cicero is how do we reflect what's really happening out there? How do we make sure that we empower each other? And while this is really focused on women, you can extrapolate this at any which way, right?
Right.
Awesome. Velda, how about you?
Hello, my name is Velda Gooden, and I definitely came to this point in my career in a very different way. I went to college and studied what everybody told me to, which was very foolish, but I was 18. I was music and a voice major. Didn't work well. It really wasn't what I wanted to do. And I ended up being a stay-at-home mom, but I saw it as an opportunity to get involved in things and do things that I normally wouldn't. And I took my kids with me. So I had 3 children. I've conducted orchestras. I've made costumes for musicals. I was always involved in all the schools. I was the room mom. I catered. I really, looking at it now, realized I was living a life of service. And when it came time, I was like, you know what? I want to go back to school. And I did. I started all over again at the age of 40 with 3 teenagers. I worked full time and went full time to college. Let me just put that out there. You can do it. And then I got my master's degree. But in looking at what to study, I was like, I love people. I love the energy. I love listening. I love sharing. So I got a degree in psychology and counseling. And I got my master's degree in business management science. So I'm not the MBA who deals with the spreadsheets. I'm the master's of business in the people part, the change management, managing your people. How do you get them to implement the things that you've decided up in the C-suite that you want done and make those business cases. So again, I came to the party a little late, but I feel like I used my opportunity prior to get there to figure out what are my passions and how I'd like to use them. So in some ways, I think that was a big benefit of mine. I kind of did it backwards in a way. So I found myself going to work for a large company in my town that was a distributor for technology. And I started out on the bottom rung. Just because you got a master's didn't mean they're gonna come beating down your door, right? So I said, give me a chance and I'll show you what I can do. And I bought a book on RFID technology the day I got the job and read it. And I found I really like this. This clicks for me, but it still was about service. I loved connecting people. I loved connecting ideas. And I realized, okay, that's my passion. It's not technology, it's the passion of connecting people, hearing, listening, enabling, pushing. So I'm very passionate about the empowering women or people who are usually not looked at as high value. Since I came in it older and I came in as a woman, I met different pushbacks, I guess, than most people. So I guess we'll talk about some of that. Right now, I call myself an enterprise technology unicorn. Nobody's ever really seen one. They're all looking for one, and they'll know it when they see it. She's right here. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, something you said, Velda, that really speaks to me. You almost said did it in reverse or you did it backwards. And I remember the first time that I met you and I was like, I cannot believe this woman went back to school in her 40s and just kicked butt. This is amazing. And I think your journey is such a great story to tell other women that may need a career change or need something that they need just to say it is possible. And you can be that enterprise unicorn, as you put it, because it is possible, right?
Right.
We do exist.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, Shelby, I feel like I missed out on your journey because we went through and I didn't really get to hear your journey. So can you just give us a quick kind of, hey, this is my journey through my career? Because to your point, I'm thrilled that you are here. I cannot believe we just talked about it during Topgolf and you're like, yes, I'm in. But I also want to be able to say, yes, let's talk about where you got to here in your career and the journey you took.
Yeah, I mean, goodness, mine's a winding path. Anyone that looks at my resume on a piece of paper kind of has a lot of question marks, right? It's a wild journey, but there's so much more that goes into how I got to where I'm at than just, what I've done in my career. I grew up in Middle Tennessee, a child in a divorced family who was, my mom was an accountant, a struggling accountant who actually went to school in her late 30s. So I see some similarities in my mom with what some of the things that Velda was sharing with us. And so, pretty much ran the household until my mom graduated the year that I graduated as a senior from high school. So, it was a tough childhood for me growing up. I often thought, gosh, I'll never be able to live the life that I want to live because I just don't have the resources to get there. And so I often doubted myself. I actually waited to go to school until I was 23. So found my way to the University of Tennessee and wanted to pursue a degree in plant sciences and kind of went down the path of actually the wine industry. I have a major in viticulture and enology and was pursuing that heavily for about 3 years. And, to get myself through school, I was working in sales for cosmetics companies and really enjoying that. And, by the time I graduated, I was pursued heavily by L'Oreal. It was actually one of the reasons why I accepted the position was it was not only the largest L'Oreal acquisition in history, but the first female-owned L'Oreal acquisition in history. So I was really excited to work for Jamie Kern-Lima. And if you know who she is, she's definitely a female empowerment leader. I like to think she has a lot of great books, and I highly recommend you learning about her journey, but that really inspired me. So, by the time I found my way into working for a major corporation, I was in a leadership position and learned quickly that this was definitely the direction that was set out before me. It was definitely prepared for me, and it was a good fit. In my journey to get to the firm and where I am in my life now, it's very clear. I think you go through some of your most heartbreaking challenges because the reward on the other side is far greater than you can ever imagine. So, I think the insight it gives me is that when I'm facing something negative or a challenge, I feel like there's no way over it, or there's no way, and sometimes there's no way around it, through it, you know, beneath it. There's always a way. And so I have that hope kind of embedded in me. It's like my DNA now. So I always know things are going to work out, and they're always for the better for you. And so, yeah, that's kind of the very high points of my career. I'm in early on in my career, and have enjoyed and been very blessed early on in my career for me, I've achieved a level of success that I never thought I could. So really, really proud of myself to have gotten this far. So that's kind of my I hope that wasn't too long, 2-3 minutes.
No, that was perfect. And I think that is just inspirational to be able to say, yes, I mean, I could probably say that everyone on this panel has had that moment of self-doubt and said, oh my goodness, am I even doing the right thing? Or had to do that career pivot, and being able to be open to that career change for yourself, and then find that aha moment that this is my calling. I can totally do this. Mm-hmm. And I obviously do very well at it as well, right? And so sometimes just being able to be open to those opportunities just gives you that next foot in the door, right? That's awesome. Mm-hmm. So before I start going through the questions, I just want to remind everyone that is watching right now, if you have any questions, please ask them. Make sure that you submit those questions for us, and we will ask the panelists as much as we can, kind of address all those questions as well. So first off, I wanted to go through and just talk about, from your perspective, where does empowerment start for you? And so Shelby, I'm going to let you kind of start it off, since we just finished talking to you. Is where does that start, and what does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when we first started talking about this panel, that was one of the first questions you all asked me, and I thought, wow, I'm still learning, right? I think we all are, and if we're honest with ourselves, we're all students and all hopefully striving to be better. So personally for me, I think empowerment starts with myself. It's one by one. I've heard the phrase shavings make a pile. And I think that's where not only just empowerment, but things can really change for the better, is just one person at a time. I mean, think about how many times in your day where you might start off negative, the rest of the day almost seems negative. It's how you're perceiving what's going to happen. So if you walk into a situation and you're empowering yourself, or you're working on yourself, then I think only positive things can come out of it. And then also learning from others. I think if understanding that we don't always have the right answer, and that sometimes, even if we think we do, hearing other ideas can deepen our understandings about ourselves, right? Like, I know so many times where I think I know how I feel about a topic, and then I hear someone else's perspective and go, wow, I think I can relate to that in some way and implement that in my thought processes too. So to boil it down, I think, empowerment starts with each and every one of us on a personal level.
I love that. I think there is something really true to be able to say, if I can be authentically empowered by myself, how much more can I empower those around me, right?
Right.
I love that. Yeah. Alicia, how about you?
Well, similarly to Shelby's response, I think I drilled it down maybe just a little bit more specific, but I said in our mind, because we have to, and she was talking about the positive outlook. So I think we're in agreement on that we have to have a mindset that analyzes it. It identifies what our limiting beliefs are, so that we can identify them and acknowledge them, because I think we absorb things from around us and from, different environments or experiences that we have, and we have to identify how we're going to react to those. So our mind, also to educating ourselves about the different things that, looking at studies, performing our own studies. I know my profession lends itself to asking lots of questions, and I'm very much an information gatherer just in my everyday life. So asking questions of people and how they feel about a situation or that type of thing. So educating, getting our mind in line, and then once we've done that research and spent that time kind of in our mind, identifying the areas, that we want to focus on, that we feel are most important to that empowerment.
I like that a lot, Alicia. I think there's something very cerebral about that, right? Obviously, it's that mental capacity. How do you make sure that you're really thinking that through? And something that you said that really feels very Cicero, and I'm just going to kind of plug this in, is that we give every new hire a book called How to Be a Friend. And the thought process behind that, and I usually, spoiler alert for anybody that's watching that's a new Cicero employee, is I spend time with them to say, you can't empower somebody unless you start befriending them. You have to get to know them to understand what empowerment means to them. It's
Right.
not just necessarily from your perspective. You have to understand where they're coming from.
Right.
So I love that. That's great.
Yeah.
Velda, how about yourself?
Okay. So, of course, the first thing I did was actually look up the word empower. And it's kind of surprised me, the two different meanings. One was like to give someone permission to actually do something. And one was, I'm going to go back to Shelby's. It starts here. Empower yourself that you own your life. I take responsibility for what I do. I take responsibility for where I am, the decisions I make. You have to own that on a personal level. In a business scenario, I will say I had a fabulous boss. Again, this was my first job, after my master's degree, and I was working with the president of the company. And after several times of sitting with him, he said, Velda, I'm not asking you to come in here and talk with you to tell you what to do. I'm bringing you in here for you to tell me what needs to happen, because you're the one closest to the customer. You're the one closest to the business strategy. I need you to tell me. And that was a huge paradigm shift for me. Rather than waiting for someone to give you permission to do something, you need to offer from your perspective what needs to be done. I will say there's no substitute for knowing your stuff, right? Doing your homework, doing your work. But if you know your stuff and you can help the company, you will be heard. As far as empowering other people, I'm a big believer in, again, that comes from self. They have to receive it. But I try to go through big efforts to not put a speed bump in front of them, right? I don't want to discourage that empowerment, to discourage or stop or mute that momentum they may be feeling. So there you go.
No, I love that kind of concept of, obviously having a great manager makes it super easy to have those types of conversations.
Right.
But we also have had a lot of conversations where it has not been super easy.
Right.
So that goes, I think, perfectly well into my next question I want to ask you. And I'm going to go back to you, Velda, since you already started this conversation.
Okay.
Point here is, what kind of conversation should you be having with your manager or your employer about empowerment? For you as a woman, as somebody that's trying to get a career path, what does that look like from your journey? And what kind of advice can we give some of the people to watch it?
And thank you for asking that. Because again, I'd never been in the corporate world, but I do understand people communicate differently. And my manager, my boss, however you want to call them, I took the attitude of, and you've heard me say this, you make me Alfred, I'll make you Batman, right? So I always ask, how would you like for me to communicate with you? How would you like information communicated to you? So for me, it's about how to build that communication, that safe communication. Ask point blank, what are my responsibilities and what kind of authority do I have? Decision making, how am I going to be measured? And if you don't have any authority, but you're being told you're being measured by that, that's a conversation to have. And that may sound like you're presenting a conflict, but as a manager, I say that shows me you're thinking something through. It's not an emotional issue, it's a matter of fact issue. I've had managers or boss ask me, I'll say, unreasonable tasks. So it's okay. I understand that's important. What do you want me to take off my plate on this side so that I can accommodate this that's obviously a priority to you? You know, you have to learn how to manage up. It's not being condescending. It's communicating, being businesslike, knowing your stuff. I think always setting the stage and being proactive. Ask how would you like for me to manage conflict? And how do I go about planning my next step in my career path? Is that something that I work with you, or should I be working with HR? All of those being very specific, again, not feelings, very matter of fact, up front, I think prevent a lot of bumps on the backside.
Agreed. And being somebody that manages people currently, that is something I go back to say, look, and it is an open forum to have those types of conversations.
Right.
And obviously I have that open door policy. I've had very, I would say, slightly emotional conversations because I think people just want their careers to be like everything.
Right.
And so I always tell them, like, look, there is nothing that you're going to say that's going to make me upset because I know you have passion if you're coming to me and asking me. So I think that's also something that I would always advise somebody. So to your point, I love that context. It really gives, I'm hoping the viewers that kind of, yes, have those direct conversations. There is nothing that you should say or anything you could say that's going to get you fired.
Right. Well, that's a red flag. If
Exactly.
Then you conversation
exactly.
that they're going, then yeah, you might need to rethink. And again, I want to always be respectful of people. Don't call your boss out in front of others and that kind of thing. But start it out as a mature peer relationship from the get-go. I think that solves a lot of problems, and it'll bring along those that maybe do have an issue with a female or some type of a diverse background they're not maybe comfortable with. Setting the table, I think, goes a long way.
Agreed. Alicia, with your diverse background, I am sure you have some context on this one.
Well, you know, I kind of pulled from our last question on this one as well, because, you know, once we've kind of done our mind work and our research, it gives us the information and the tools, and it kind of, we've identified out what areas are important to focus on in those conversations. So when I look at the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants does a study, and 3 of the things that come to light in that is that, you know, we already identified that there is you know, it's a male-dominated tier in the leadership, and so that's a challenge because you know, it's human nature to look for people that are like yourself to pull up into those ranks behind you. And so being able to kind of advocate and look for opportunities to present yourself as a, you know, someone that would be available. Also, you know, with having fewer women in the leadership role, then you don't have the role model to go, you know, look at that's like yourself. So there's, you know, different hurdles that way as well. And then, you know, career life integration can come into play with that, because there's some things that women are looked more traditionally in terms of childcare. We saw this, you know, last year in the pandemic, you know, based on, you know, attribute it to kind of the wage gap, and then also that role where, you know, we were put in situations where there weren't many choices. So, you know, I looked at the statistic, it was almost 3 times as likely as men of the same age group to not be working due to childcare demands last year. So those are just different challenges to be able to talk about and to be able to bring up. And so bringing it from our prior, doing the education, finding those areas to talk about, and being willing to start the conversation is what I think is real important in that area.
Yeah, I will say, I think everybody kind of had a reflection moment last year to say, how do we empower our employees? How do we empower each other through this? And how does this look like? I really like the point that you also made about how do we have the conversations of, clearly, I don't see somebody like myself in management. how do I make myself available to that? And just being open to have that conversation, I think that really goes that mile, because, it's one of those things where if leadership is not seeing that, or your executives are not seeing that, it's really opening it up and saying, yes, absolutely, I am willing and able to be that person.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times I think it's a subconscious. They are not aware to some degree, that that's the case for them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, I go back to a lot of books, because I'm a total book nerd, right? It's like, okay, our leadership is reading BE 2.0. And it's the kind of concept of, do you have a seat on the bus? And I really want to be able to say, like, sometimes it's just the wrong bus, and that's okay.
Right.
Yeah. And just being able to say, I got to get off, because if I'm not having that open door policy, or if I'm not having the conversations that are empowering me, that's clearly a sign that I'm in the wrong seat, or I'm on the wrong bus.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. All right, Shelby, how about yourself?
Wow, it's a great question. I love this question, because I think for kind of the next generation of leaders, you have to understand that leaders are people too, right? They put their pants on just the same way we do. They have families and a life just the same that we do. And I think we need to have empathy and compassion for their roles. I've had the honor of being a leader early on in my career, and it's not an easy task. It really isn't. You're always questioning. It's almost like parenthood. If you're doing it right, I think if you're a passionate leader, you're always wondering how you can be better. I've read that, not all readers will lead, but all leaders read. And I think, even if you're not a leader, kind of getting into the mindset of those who are leading you, and like acting as a student of them, can really put yourself in a level playing field. And then I think just having real conversations that, aren't combative in nature, if that makes sense, that come from a place of wanting to understand their perspectives, and also wanting to open the door for them to understand yours. I think that's the best place to start. I've had a lot of really wonderful leaders, in my career, and have been very blessed with some really wonderful bosses that I know I can go to and say, hey, and I think, the way you go about it, and I think Alicia, and also Velda alluded to this a bit, but it's not just presenting something to a leader in a combative way, but saying, hey, like, I'd love to talk to you about something next week. Let's schedule something for 30 minutes next week. And that way you can kind of noodle on it for a week, right? And you're not, the passion's behind you by that point. And then you sit down and you say, hey, I've really been thinking about this. And you can sit down and say, this is something that concerns me. And Velda mentioned knowing your stuff. And then Alicia mentioned a lot of statistics about knowing your stuff. And I think that's how you lead. Hey, these are the statistics. These are the facts, right? Here's a concern I have within our organization or between our relationship. How can we move forward together? Because this is what I'd love to see. I think those conversations can't turn combative, and you shouldn't be afraid. I think so many, not just women, but so many people in the workplace kind of have a imposter syndrome where they feel like they shouldn't be in the role they're in. So they're almost afraid to bring something to their boss' attention, but I think when you level the playing field and you bring something up in a really healthy way, then the outcome can't be as bad as you think you make it up to be in your head, if that makes sense. So I know I'm kind of dancing around the answer, but those are just a few of the thoughts that come to mind when I hear this question. I feel like this is one of those we could pull out a whiteboard and spend a day kind of, what's the best way to communicate? Because people are all different. But I think starting with compassion and empathy, because they are people too, right? They just like us. So that's what comes to mind initially whenever I hear that question.
Yes, and if I could kind of go backward a little bit, whenever I have a new boss, and I do always ask, how would you like for me to communicate with you? I mean, it's not about if there's a problem, right? There are bosses that want you to just verbally condense the facts for them, right, and give it to them in bullets, right? Then there's the one that wants it in an email, Reader's Digest version, and that's fine. But what that does is, one, you're respecting the way they receive information, and you're increasing the chances that they're going to actually hear and listen and receive, because we all learn differently, right? And when it comes to a conflict, you earn respect, and it should be mutual respect whenever there's a conflict. How you resolve it, I think as you said, I like what you said, Shelby. They're people too. Do I have time to give a short example, Amber?
No, Velda. Of course you do. Go for it.
Okay. So I had a female boss. We've all had one kind of like this, that it just seemed like out of the blue. There was absolutely nothing that I could do right. I tried all my best bob and weaves, and I tried everything I knew to do, but she just did not seem to care for me. So I went to the vice president, and I'd applied for a position in a different part of the company. And he called me in and he said, I'm not going to let you move, because if I let you move, you'll get the reputation for being someone that runs away from a conflict. And I'm not going to let you do that. That was very wise. He said, so it's your job to work this out. It wasn't in a demeaning way. He did it. He was protecting me and my career. So what I found out was my boss was going through a difficult time. Her father had Alzheimer's. She was shouldering a lot at home with a sick mother, a father with Alzheimer's. It wasn't me. And so I sat down and wrote a short, thoughtful note and told her that whatever it was, that I seemed to, I'm trying to remember exactly what I said because it's been a while, but I said, my vow to you is, when and if ever I leave your team, you're going to be sad to see me go, because I'm going to be the best employee and the most supportive of you that I can be. I didn't confront her what was going on, but I just quietly put that at her desk, and our relationship changed. And matter of fact, she recommended me for the biggest promotion I've ever gotten in my life. So, you have to try to read and try to navigate the situation. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But Shelby, to your point, she was a human being. And when I stopped to see her through that lens, it made all the difference in the world. So I tried to make it short.
Yeah. Well, and I think, Shelby, something else that you said that I clung to, and I kind of, wrote in my little notebook right here was, the difference between having a leader and a manager and a boss, right? I'm sure you guys all see the, the LinkedIn post and, the memes across it, but being able to be a leader doesn't mean that you have management authority. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily your boss. And, I look at this panel and I'm like, you guys are all leaders in my mind, first and foremost. But I think that's also something to be said about, look, you have the opportunity to be a leader. And I think being able to say that for the watchers, to say, look, you're a leader in your own right, and taking that, and Velda, your great example is, how do you lead yourself through that? And it goes back to our first question of, how do you empower yourself intrinsically? Yeah. And so, there's a question that we had from somebody that was watching. They said, hey, I have a manager that doesn't have an open door policy. How do I create a channel of that kind of communication?
Right.
And I think what I heard from you guys, and, feel free to add in more, but it was asking them directly, like, how do I talk to you effectively? And being that direct with them, I think gives you the opportunity to feel that empowerment of, okay, we're at least getting there. We're doing those steps, right? I think that's really what I'm hearing from this panel. Anything else to add, team?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to chime in here quickly. I know that's a challenging thing you must be going through, or someone that is going through. Hypothetical questions, that's fine too. But I think we've all been there. And kind of Velda's example was really great about, it didn't seem like that was kind of an open door relationship between the two of them. And so I think when you find yourself in a situation like that, kind of understand their role in your life too, right? I mean, we've seen a lot of great leaders throughout history, and they're not all your best friend, right? Or they're not all leading you maybe in the way you would feel to be led the best way, the way that would translate best to you. I've had a boss in my career that I just kind of felt the same way as Velda. Like, goodness, it feels like nothing I do can really just please her, right? And then I ended up moving on after I kept telling myself, okay, God, whatever you're trying to teach me, let me learn it quickly, whatever it is, let me figure it out. And I knew that I was learning something that was going to catapult me in through the rest of my career. So sometimes when you're going through something challenging, maybe look at it through a different lens. And when I ended up leaving, that company, she was very sad to see me go. It almost reminds me of The Devil Wears Prada. That movie, I'm thinking that's kind of what I'm thinking of. Obviously not a great example, but
right.
It taught her some really great skills that she was going to use for the rest of her career. And I think looking at it through a lens of, okay, I'm in this season of life where things are really feeling challenging. What am I learning from it? And do your best to communicate and try to make the most of that relationship. But if at the end of the day, it's just not going to work out, you're still learning something. So that's kind of my 2 cents. And I think handling it with grace and empathy is the best way. I mean, I know the last thing you want to go do is spread bad words about anyone else. So I think, hold your tongue, right? And lead with grace. And I think that goes for everything. You go to a restaurant, and your server's rude to you, or someone that you pass on in a car honks their horn at you, right? Like, I think that's the best way to handle it. And it's the best thing for us too. That's the best, best way for us internally to handle it. But it's just what I was thinking.
I love that. Well, then I'd like to stop talking about just how we are empowering each other in the workforce for ourselves and start talking about how we are empowering the women around us. Because I think really, in this conversation, it's about, okay, assuming that I am still my work in progress, as we all are, of empowering myself. I'm intrinsically every day saying, yes, I am empowering. I'm doing these things. I'm having great conversations with my manager. I'm having the direct conversations I need to feel empowered in my career. How do we then pass that off to our colleagues and the other women in our organization? Shelby, would you like to go first?
Oh gosh, that is a really great question. And it's $1 million question, right? I mean, I think it's infectious when we're out there spreading the good word about anything. Word travels fast, right? Like, I think that's kind of the mode in my head of, if I'm doing the work and the due diligence on me, and it's going to rub off, right? I think also just bringing attention to topics in a really positive way can empower others, because I think Alicia mentioned this earlier, and if not, please, I apologize, Alicia, but I think she said something like, sometimes subconsciously, these leaders are doing things that they don't even realize they're doing. It's not even a conscious effect. So sometimes just delicately bringing attention to it can empower others, And I'm also thinking of, I'm in accounting. Alicia mentioned it's more of a male-dominated industry. We've all found ourselves in a conversation socially or in a business environment where someone in the conversation is being left out, right? Maybe they're introverted and they can't catch a break in conversation to insert themselves, or maybe it's just a lot of conversation going on, and your thoughts and ideas aren't welcome, right? I think just making it a safe place for others and knowing when to kind of back off and then pedal forward to allow space for others to bring new ideas, bring new concepts, get an opportunity on a project, or those are ways I think that we can empower others, and because we're selfish-minded beings, right? So I think being selfless can really go a long way.
I love that, Shelby. I'm giddy with you talking about that, because it's something that we're teaching our leadership about, this concept of psychological safety. creating a place that you can have whatever type of conversation that you need to have with your peers, with leadership, that you can truly say, hey, let's have open conversations, because then that's really where the good conversations happen, right? I love that. That's amazing. Alicia, how about yourself?
Well, similarly, I guess, as to Shelby, in terms of getting people involved, but I also thought of it just as helping somebody else go through that process that we may have already gone through, and getting our minds, into the right space. I like to ask them questions so it gets their gears turning. So they're coming up with what they need on their own through, guidance, and maybe sharing examples of how, I've navigated some situations previously, because I think stories, people can relate to those, in terms of just giving I have an example, but I know, kind of, I want to, I guess, add a few more things otherwise. So it's communicating with each person that you're dealing with, looking at, I'm thinking kind of, we've got several that have gone out on maternity leave. And so that's something that's challenging in public accounting sometimes, because that hasn't always been available as an employee benefit. So, you kind of have to choose between saving up vacation, this type of thing. So it does put an extra layer of pressure to an already stressful time of life. And, we have some that choose to go part-time, some to choose to stay full-time, so helping them think through, what do I need on the other end of this? And honestly, going through that experience, you don't really know until you get there, but at least you've thought through some of the ideas. You've heard maybe some others' experience, and can, glean from that. So helping them think through is the way that I like to empower, and then helping them to see and identify, I think we all saw the illustration last year where there was like 3 people standing on a box to look over a fence. One could see definitely was all the same size box, but then there was a shorter person that needed 2 boxes to be able to see over the fence. So identifying what are the 2 boxes that this person might need, or what's the, so that we can all have the same opportunities to move forward.
Yeah, I love that, Alicia, because I think there is something to be said about, we don't all have the same resources. We don't all have the same availability. So being able to have the conversation and the candidness to say, well, let's talk that through, and leveraging what Shelby said to say, let's talk about it from a safe space. Right. Let's talk about it as, what are your options? What are you wanting to do? And here are different avenues, because what happens with, Shelby's career is going to be very different than yours, Alicia, and what's possible, right? Right. I love that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Velda, how about yourself?
That is a great question. And it made me look back and think about what have I done in the past. I'm a big believer, confidence is something you earn. If you're confident and you haven't earned it, you're just cocky. So how does someone, especially younger, or maybe they're in a new position, earn confidence? Is you have to give them an opportunity to try it, to do it. So I always included people in on projects, and included them in part of when I would do the presentation. And I put their name on it. I had them in the room. I always made sure that other management people had visibility and even saw these people. A lot of times, depending on your workplace, work is usually very siloed, so you don't get exposure to other departments. In my company, we had a thing called, I told you about this, Amber, walk a mile. And if you don't have something, go to HR and recommend it. That's another feather in your cap, where it would enable someone to say, I've never had exposure into accounting. I'd like to sit down with Shelby for a couple hours and just shadow her and see what that job's like. A good employee in a company, you don't want them to leave if they're looking for a new opportunity. You want to move them and keep that knowledge that you've gained. Another thing I always encouraged people around me, and I think Shelby said it before, and Alicia talking about diversity. This isn't just a woman issue. Anybody, whether it's somebody fresh out of college, maybe your workplace doesn't value them as much. Maybe it's someone older, whatever reasons, whatever is floating around, you need to dispel that, bring them with you, The tide raises all boats, and that's what's going to change your workplace mind place about diversity. But I would say when we had a charity board that had employees on it. I would always say volunteer, volunteer, volunteer. Anytime there's something, an event, whatever, where other people from other departments are involved, it gives you a chance, one, for them to get to know you, for you to show that you're dependable, for that you're a good worker, you get along with others, all of those things. That's what they're looking for. So any kind of exposure, and it also helps you build confidence in yourself, right? You've earned it. You've put yourself out there. Those are the kind of things I always tried to do, because I noticed in business, I worked with a lot of big companies, is everything is usually very siloed. So people don't really know what's going on over here. And back to my career path, I said I want to learn a little bit about all of it, right? So I can really speak to something in business. Is this a strategic decision? Because I understand how that affects Shelby and accounting, right? So those are the kind of things I always try to encourage new employees, and also learn how to teach what you love, or learn how to do project management of what you love, because that will be your differentiator when you go up against somebody else that's in the same field. And I know we're getting kind of close on time, so I'm going to stop there.
Well, clearly you have taken an amazing career path, and you have a lot to add to the table. So I think what I took from that, and something that I think I'm hoping others have as well, is just being able to take from your perspective and what you can empower to others, giving them opportunity to empower them.
Right.
Be it hey, I'm volunteering here, you want to come with me? Or, hey, I have this new project, you said you might be interested in it. Showing them the opportunity of what does that empowerment look like. And it doesn't, to your point, it doesn't just apply to women, it applies to all. But I think also, to your point, I loved your analogy of the tide rises all boats. And I think that's where we have an opportunity to do that. And I think it's beautifully said. So with only a few minutes left, I'm actually going to go into one of my, I think, gnarly questions. Because of course, that's what we're going to leave on. That's the best one too, right? Is what kind of conversations do we need to be having with our employers about maternity leave, about PTO policies, about what we need as women in the workplace to support us, and and how we do that effectively? And I'm going to start, because this is a passion project for me, and I will be bluntly honest. As a small business owner, it's a constant struggle of how much can I give back to my employees? How can I make sure that we're doing everything possible, but also being profitable? It is the hardest thing, and it's the hardest thing for me to realize. I wish I could give them everything. But I think for the first and foremost, Shelby, why don't you kick us off to talk about what, from your perspective, would you like to have? What kind of conversations have you had? Which conversations would you like to have in the future?
Yeah, this is a really great question, because, I think it's uncomfortable, right? It's uncomfortable for us. And this, I think, does relate a lot to women, to ask for what we need, right? Less about what we want, right? Because I'm happy to ask for what I want, but when there's something that you need, it's hard and it's uncomfortable to go to leadership and say, look, this is my standard and this is what I need to stay here. I think women, especially young women or women early on in their career, are taking, the first offer they get, right? Oh, this must be what I'm worth because this is what they've offered me. Without knowing that, if you really take a deep dive into what you're worth, and I highly encourage to do your homework, know your numbers, right? What am I worth? What should I expect? What kind of raises should I expect each year? If my performance is X, this should be my raise. If they promise me this bonus and I outperform it, this is what I should receive. So I think knowing what your worth is a great place to start, especially early on in like compensation, salary negotiations, things like that. And understanding also that you can negotiate it, right? I have so many friends that didn't even realize that, your first offer, it's a negotiation, right? It's an opening bid, right? You can talk openly about what you need. And I think it starts there when it comes to things like maternity leave and paternity leave. I think educating and sitting down and saying, look, this is what I'm expecting. What is the policy, and what can I get out of this? Maybe I can work part-time when I come back. I expect maybe I get 4 weeks, off, or 8 weeks off, and then I want to work 8 weeks part-time, and then from there I want to work 3/4, whatever it looks like for you. But don't go in there, I guess, and I know we're slow on time or limited on time, so I just want to be really quick and say, don't go in there asking them what they can give you. Go in there asking what you need and starting from there, right? That's my biggest tip, is to say, and to do your homework. Don't go into a meeting blind and just say, oh, it'll work out, right? Like, you need to go in there knowing what you need and what you want, and then starting there, instead of just saying, hey, I'm going to be going on a maternity leave. What can you give me? Saying, okay, I'm going on a maternity leave. This is what I need. How can we make it work? That's my biggest tip.
I love that. Absolutely. And I think it goes back to our first question, right? If you're empowered to be able to say, this is what I need to be super successful, then you can have that conversation.
Right. Well, I think you have to educate yourself, but you're coming in to have a business strategy conversation. That is what it is. And it's not about feels, right? As a business owner, they want to know, how's this going to affect my bottom line, It's not just saying, that would be really nice thing for you to do. Your homework, and bring numbers. Come in with some examples of companies that are your size and what they've done and how it's affected their bottom line. I think that's a conversation to start.
Absolutely. Alicia.
Yes. Well, I am excited because this is a topic that is, I guess recently our firm had a women's initiative team, and they talked through and worked through, and it had members from all the different departments, but where we haven't previously had maternity and paternity leave available, it is now an employee benefit. So that is a huge thing to be able to help attract and retain team members, and super excited about that. And just a little bit of, so I guess that's one way to bring the conversation, is to start a women's initiative team and think about the different things that need to happen.
Right.
And then in relation to pay gap, a large part of it is what we accept. Shelby alluded to that people don't even realize that we have the option to do anything different. So looking at, Amber, you said you like books, and one that was recommended to me in this vein was Know Your Value. It's by Mika Brzezinski. She's an American journalist, and it's very good. So I recommend that as well if somebody wants to dive into that area. So just being willing to have the conversation, and also learning who to have that conversation with in those areas that are important.
Right.
Yeah. Velda, can you give me a minute?
So I want to speak to the pay gap thing, because that has certainly been an issue in my life. I think we need to maybe sometimes be a little bit more creative on how we're looking for compensation. Not everything is the paycheck, right? So negotiate paying for my gym membership, negotiate helping pay for my childcare. Maybe, there are things that may make it easier from an accounting perspective for a company, benefit for a company to offer you than just on your paycheck. That really means more to you, that really has a bigger value. I actually asked two men that I respected greatly when I started work, how do you ask for a raise? And this was the profound advice I got for both of them. Make an appointment to talk to your boss and just say, I need to make more money. What do I need to do? It's not about feels. It's not about, this is what I need. Please tell me what I need to do. And the first time I did that, my boss just kind of like looked like I had hit him with a boxing glove. And he said, I'll know it when I see it. And I said, well, that's kind of nebulous. I want to know what it's going to look like because I'm going to do it. Whatever you tell me, I'm going to do it. So we need to get on the same page. So I came back in 6 months and I said, okay, am I there yet? Because I've got 6 months left before my review. I want to make sure I'm there. You need to tell me what you need from me. He said, you've done it. I said, okay. So again, just very, I need this. What do I need to do to get it?
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, ladies, we are at time, and I wish we could go on for hours. I know it with your backgrounds that are completely diverse, and I love the career paths that you've had. But thank you for just spending time talking about what empowerment means to you and your career paths and how we can hopefully empower those around us. Thank you for your time again. Love this. Until next time, you enjoy your weekends, and I cannot wait to see your faces soon. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
This was
Thanks all.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.